A little bit better. Tell me about you. How long have you been in the district? What do you do?
Um,
All that great stuff.
this is my 32nd year in the district. I've spent all of my educational career in the district, and I grew up in Holly Hill, so I enjoy working here. I spent 24 years in the classroom, taught third, fourth, and fifth grade. I especially enjoyed my years of teaching ELA. That's my passion. I'm not a math person. I don't care for math. Um, and this is my 8th year as a coach. And I've spent all my time at this school, except for when I very first started teaching fourth and fifth grade was at the old middle school where the town hall is now.
I know, yeah.
And so I spent my first 2 years there, and the rest of them I've been in this building. This is my home away from home. So
Oh,
I'm still
wow.
here.
That's a long time. I
That
don't know
is
if
a
I'm
long
gonna be
time.
around that long. I don't know if I'm gonna be around that long.
I used to say that. It didn't
Let
happen.
me. Okay. Well, I've only been around for 17 years. I started opposite you. I started teaching phlebotomy, and
Okay.
then at Midlands Tech in Columbia. And then I said, well, let me try this high school thing. So I enrolled myself in PACE, and I started teaching high school. I had chemistry and biology. So I taught high school for 11 years. And I started at Fairfield Central, and then came down the interstate and started working at AC Florida, then Keenan. And then I came to Lake Marion. And then I had this idea that I wanted to do curriculum. And to understand curriculum, I used to always say, I don't like those people who are always telling me to do something and they never did it. So I said, well, I need to spend some time in middle school to learn how middle school feeds the high school curriculum. Because as a high school teacher, we will always say it's the middle school teacher's fault. It's da 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 da. So I said, let me spend some time on middle school. So then that's when I started working at Robert E. Howard in Orangeburg.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 5 years there teaching science, math, and gifted and talented. So I came here, and this is my first year here as an instructional coach. My last year at Howard, I did Title I for the district. So that's just a little bit about me. Um, what did I like most in my career? Hmm, I think my days teaching chemistry. And that's because you could do so much with it in terms of activities. And the kids were bigger. So I was comfortable with them having certain objects and not having to kind of, but some of my best years were teaching chemistry. But I also liked my middle school years. Um, the most productive middle school years for me was the year that I had to teach science and math in the same year. It caused me to grow in ways that I never thought possible. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always been a learner of words. Um, and I tell everybody my story because it's kind of why I fell in love with education. When I was younger, I didn't have the opportunity to be reared by my natural parents. And so I spent a little time being lost because I was old enough to remember, that time where I was taken from them and then going into the new home. So there was a couple of years that I was just kind of just, and there was this principal. His name was Ahmad Fahim Shabazz. And I think his brother worked in Orangeburg School District. Mr. Stroman was his brother. But this particular guy was from the Anderson area. And he kind of sat me down and took some time, and he introduced me to this book that said, and it's the first novel that I ever remembered reading. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings by Maya Angelou.
Mm-hmm.
And from that book, I wanted to read all the other books included in the anthology. And that's what I did. I started getting the other books and I read them out of order. Then I wanted to read them again in the order that they were supposed to go into. And that fostered my love of books. If you come in my house, you always see. So then from there, he entered me into the lieutenant governor's
Writing.
uh,
Yes.
right for expository writing, which I won. And then he put me in Toastmasters, and I won an oratorical contest. So even though I'm science and math, I've always been,
You always love reading.
I've always loved reading. So with that being said, and I think you told me a little bit of what inspires you, but to expound on it, what inspires you to work in the educational field?
Well, as a child, I started out as a struggling reader. And when I was in second grade, I had a teacher that really took time with me and she worked with me in differentiated groups. And I think that's where I started, to kind of catch on. And, now I obviously read very well, but I just kind of want to do that for other kids, because you don't want kids to get lost in the cracks. And also because I spent so many years in the classroom, I think I have a deep understanding and appreciation for teachers. And as a coach, I try to mentor teachers, but I also try to be, someone that they can talk to, try to build relationships and trust. And also, as I said, I'm from Holly Hill, so I want to give back to the community and I want what's best for the teachers and the students in this community. So that's why I'm still here after 32 years, because I feel like I still have something to give. So.
Got you. In your response, I heard you said that you want what's best for teachers and students, which are our primary audience when it comes to coaching. So, what coaches that kind of leads into your coaching methodologies? So, what coaching methodologies do you think works best in your practices, or and it differs from building to building? So, we can only talk about your building. What do you think works best for your building?
Well, I think a coach should be a mentor and a support system for teachers. So I try to serve as a resource as well as a co-teacher. So I don't want to ask you to do anything as a teacher that I'm not willing to do for you or with you, like as a model. So to kind of hold your hand and help you through that. And I think that coaches should always develop a relationship first. You don't want teachers to think that you're coming in there as an I gotcha. You need to be that support system, a resource. I look for strengths to coach into and then try to lead by example, and then we can work on the areas of growth. But you got to have that trust first.
Absolutely, absolutely. What tools do you use technology wise as a literacy coach?
I use Teams, I use Promethean boards, PowerPoints, um, online games. I use audiobooks. The kids have done things with audiobooks. I do a lot of things to try to accommodate learning styles of both the teachers and the students. When I'm working in classrooms, I try to use different things like Kahoot. We also record lessons, which helps me as a observer. I'm not an evaluator, but I am observer of lessons. And so I can't always be where I need to be at a particular time. So, when teachers record their lessons, I can go back sometimes and give feedback. Or if somebody says, I don't understand how to do this, because we have 3 new curriculums in this building this year. And so there's a lot of assistance needed with implementation. And I don't have all the answers, but if you say, I don't understand this part of the lesson and you recorded the lesson and I wasn't in there, I can go back and look at it. So technology has been a great support in that area.
Awesome. And you mentioned the 3 different curriculums. Have you had an opportunity to look at the stories that they put in the FOSS kits? I think they do a pretty good job of selecting stuff that kind of piques interest levels.
I have not, but I would like to look at that. But yeah, and I wasn't even counting FOSS. That actually makes it 4. I was counting Wit and Wisdom, Letterland, and Eureka Math. So FOSS makes it 4 new
And I
curriculums.
forgot about Letterland, but yeah, Letterland. What strategies do you use to identify the needs of students?
So we use progress monitoring with running records every 2 weeks, and we hold data meetings where we discuss individual students with the teachers and with our leadership team, which also consists is principal, assistant principal, SLT, me, the teacher, guidance, speech, resource, interventionist, so that we have lots of input to help progress monitor those kids, so that if we do have struggling readers, we're looking at best practices and some different strategies that the teacher can use. We also analyze various data like benchmark, map fluency. We use rubrics. we look at our strengths and weaknesses as a school when we're progress monitoring, and we spent a particular amount of time this year on foundational skills because we found that that was a weakness, and I think it had a lot to do with the pandemic because the kids were learning these things virtually, and it's really hard to learn how to read and enunciate and say all these sounds and stuff when people are behind masks and they're at home or whatever. So we have been progress monitoring to make sure that we're hitting all of the notes as far as these things go that we saw were deficits last year, so that we don't, send kids on and on and on without these foundational skills. So we use a lot of tools
Absolutely.
for progress monitoring.
And you kind of stole my thunder with my next question about data, because you answered one and the same, but you mentioned rubrics. Just to take a walk off the beaten path for a minute, rubrics, do you guys develop them as a team, or do you leave that up to each individual teacher?
Well, it's mostly individual teachers, and we don't always use rubrics. Like with a running record, there is no rubric. They're just looking for those miscues and whether or not the child has comprehension. But in the upper grades, we use more rubrics, like with their writing, especially with TDA. There's a 4.0 rubric, and so we try to make sure the children have an understanding of how the rubric is going to be used to score them. And then we have done some in the past, not as much as I would like to because we're busy implementing 4 new curriculums, but we've done things in the past like where we, use the rubric to drive our instruction. So we looked at the rubric and we, would have like PLCs around that and bring back the writing. And then we would talk about what we see as commonalities throughout our building. What do our kids need support with as far as text-dependent analysis goes? And, what do we have to do to get the kids to move up? Because several years ago, we had kids, and I know you've seen this, who would not be scored or would get a 0 because they're not actually addressing the prompt. So, we try to discuss those things as a school and make the kids aware of that. So I'm hoping we'll see some improvements in that area.
And I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned it, and stressing those 4 new curriculums. As a coach, as a literacy coach, I know as a technology coach, I have observed teachers struggling to find their place, if you will, in the new curriculum. Trying to figure out, where I fit, where do I put my, they feel like it's totally scripted. So as a literacy coach, it's kind of like you're fighting 2 battles. You're trying to help them transition with the identity of a scripted or integrated curriculum, and then you're trying to, is it hard for you as a coach to determine like what is their true need, because you're trying to see past them trying to find their way in that curriculum and then figure out what skills need to be developed? You kind of, it's
Yes. And I mean, I think there's a balance, and I think there's a place for scripted curriculum. Like, I mean, if it's the first time with the curriculum and you're not familiar with it, then that script is great. Or let's say you're a first-year teacher and you have no idea how to teach phonics, okay? And here's a scripted program, that's great. But, somebody who's been teaching 25 years, they might not need all of that. So, I think you kind of have to pick and choose. I do find that like with Letterland, more often than not, it's better to stick to the script because there are a lot of rules, phonetic rules that kids have got to know to learn to read. And it's all there in the script. It gives you a model. It tells you exactly what to do. But then when you go over to more literacy-based curriculum, like let's say wit and wisdom, that's where as a coach and a teacher, I find myself wanting to go off the beaten path a little bit, not stick to the script so much because, well, there are several things there, and this is more of my opinion than you probably wanted, but that text is very complex and rich. And yes, that's great, but we have a lot of kids who have a lot of unfinished learning, and there's a lot of text in wit and wisdom that they can't read independently. So somewhere in there, we have to give the teachers the autonomy to make decisions for their kids and provide them with some text that they can read independently as well. So there's a balance there that we have to keep up with to make sure that we're covering the standards, that we're meeting the needs of all the students. So yeah, that is a battle.
Yeah. Well, that's it for me. I'm done, and I'm gonna have to steal your phrase, unfinished learning. That's my new coin phrase. I like that. But it was a pleasure having you, Miss Carter, and I want to thank you for working with my crazy schedule and me dropping off the face of the earth and coming back.
That's okay.
Uh,
We have a crazy schedule in this building too, so I understand.
but I appreciate it, and I look forward to more dialogue as we hurdle these curriculums and start meeting as coaches more often and collaboratively to learn how. Because what we do, well, what I do right now definitely is a part of what you do. And we can't exist in silos. So I'm looking forward to when we start having those collaborative conversations.
So let me ask you an off the books question. What do your teachers think of the wit and wisdom? Do they find that the text is difficult for the children?
They do.
We have
And they're struggling to find their place to scaffold. Um, I look forward to when we start getting the kids that you guys have. Maybe what is that, grade 5? Because that's when it was implemented. Now those guys are going to be awesome. But for the kids that got, for lack of better words, thrown into it, and then they were thrown into it during the pandemic, it's been a bit of a struggle. It's been a bit of a struggle.
And I mean, you know, last year during the pandemic, it was particularly hard with wit and wisdom because they wanted the kids to have books in hand. Well, the kids were at home and the books were in the school building. So, you know, everything was
Absolutely.
virtual, document cameras. It was a nightmare.
I was still teaching math when the pandemic hit and they rolled out the integrated curriculum. So we did, but of course, some people won't. We had a drive through where kids could pick up the Eureka math booklets, but you know how well that
did that too, but we didn't, and you know, all the kids didn't have them. And, you know, and for wit and wisdom, for some reason, the district ordered, well, I do know why, because the wit and wisdom curriculum is set up like this, where you think pair share a lot. So we only had one book for every 2 kids. We didn't have enough to send all home, so we had to do it virtually. So it wasn't
And then
good.
another thing, you see me looking left and right because I'm trying to find it on my desk. Another thing that's been a struggle is that a lot of teachers don't know what we know about the curriculum. And what do I mean by that is um, a lot of teachers I'm finding have not, or it has not been shared with them for whatever rhyme or reason, not pointing fingers. It's just one of those things that just is. Um, and you know this, the progression indicators for a teacher, like they have no idea that this exists. And they have no idea that, you know, certain teacher actions equal certain student actions, and that this is what I see. And until we can be more intentional, if you will, about just like we drive home the standards and the 4.0 rubric, if we want this to be successful, we have to, you know, we have to do the full professional development and not just, it's been real piecemeally.
Yes, it has. And you know, I feel like we've gotten a lot of things after the fact. Like, why didn't we have that up front? Why wasn't that in professional development for the teachers? You know, like, I don't know about you, but I'm spread real thin. I have 4K through 5th grade. I lead PLCs every Thursday. I have specific teachers that I'm in coaching cycles with. I have to study the lesson plans for those
And you're
teachers.
probably a mentor too.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And then another thing about us that spreads so thin is, and I don't mind it, but it creates a barrier to my job. Technically, I'm an instructional coach. I'm a technology coach. When you use me as an administrator, it kills my effectiveness as a coach because they see, they don't see the coach, Yolanda. They start to see the administrator, Yolanda.
I don't have that very often, though. I have really good administrative support in this building, but I do know what you're talking about, and I've seen that a lot with coaches in other buildings, because you know we visit other schools and stuff with the literacy specialists from the State Department every month, and so you know a lot of people get pulled out for a lot of things that coaches technically are not supposed to do. So you know. I understand that it happens. I'm very fortunate here because we have a principal and an AP who are very involved. So both of them, can pretty much handle whatever. But
right. The moment you use me to do a 4.0 rubric evaluation, and like I was saying, that's not a bad thing, but
yeah, I see what you're saying. See, I never evaluate. I've never done that. I'm not a 4.0 rubric evaluator. Now, I do observe. I observe and I give feedback, but I don't use a rubric like that, So
but
I
those are
do
things that
understand
I
what you're saying.
feel. Yeah, I think we're going to work on those, and I look forward to those conversations. And like I said, I look forward to the collaborative conversations and the closing the gap with these integrated curriculums. So I'm optimistic about where it's going.
I hope it will get better. So maybe next year we'll have more of a normal school year, which would be great for these kids.
Yes, it's well, this year is much better than it
Yes, it
was.
is. Yes,
So, like I said, I'm hopeful. And again, I thank you for your time, because time is a very limited resource in
that's
our
true.
world.
Well, let me know if you need anything else. And like I said, I shot you the reading plan, so hopefully that will help you with the other part of your assignment.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Have a good
Have a
one.
good day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.